Greetings and salutations, and welcome to another Megaman X Command Mission challenge run, or as I like to call this run, the Megaman Zero Command Mission run. Just like with our last run, we'll be doing yet another solo run, but with our good pal Zero instead. And don't worry, this video shouldn't be nearly as long as the previous one, and won't be split into parts either. Mostly because I wanted to focus on the boss battles and any notable combats rather than the story for this one. But before we get started, a few things to note. While X Solo can be played on both the PS2 version and GameCube version of the game, we only managed to get Zero Solo to work properly on the GameCube version, so that's the version we'll be playing today. I'm also using the HD texture pack made by Protoman ZX Advent from the Dolphin forums, which is why the game looks a little bit different than before. Personally, I like this texture pack and fully recommend it, but there are a couple of quirks about it. Anyways, let's get started as we infiltrate Giga City, get separated from X, ditch Shadow the Hedgehog, and climb up the Legrano ruins and proceed through the rest of the game using only Zero. As for the rules of this run, we're only allowed to use Zero, which is now possible thanks to Robin's programming brain finding a way to jury-rig this entire process so that only Zero can ever be in the party and no one else, as well as de-leveling him to level 1 so that he doesn't start out immediately overpowered. This did mean that Robin had to figure out what his stat spread would theoretically be at level 1, since setting him at level 1 didn't actually change his stats. So he basically leveled him up to whatever level he joined your party at, then subtracted those stats from his base stats at level 1, giving us a proper first level Zero. Nice. Some things to go over before the run actually begins. Because Cinnamon isn't going to be in our party, we'll never be able to use the Force Metal Generation feature that she has. This is because every recipe is based on her current level, so no levels means no Force Metal generating. Sad, but what can you do? As for Zero himself, these are his starting stats. They're not great, to be honest. If we compare them to X's starting stats, Zero has slightly less defenses, speed, and significantly lower power, but much higher LE, or life energy as the game elects to use. As for what these stats do, essentially, power factors into how much damage you'll do to the enemy, armor reduces the amount of melee damage you take, shield reduces the amount of range damage you take from bullets or lasers, and speed determines how many turns you get in combat and how often they happen. As for his kit, Zero starts with his old reliable Z-Saber, with a whopping power of 2. Now I want to clarify some things from X Solo. Power is kind of a weird stat compared to other games. Going into X Solo for some reason, I thought that power on weapons was technically different than power on the character. Typically, weapons have their own weapon stats in other games, but in this game, weapons actually increase the actual power stat on the character. So in this instance, Zero's power is actually 18, being boosted to 20 by the Z-Saber. And this weapon hits twice, so really what this means is that Zero would be hitting an enemy with 20 power twice. So yeah, Zero basically has an effective 40 power compared to X's 32 power he would start with, so Zero's power isn't all too bad. Along with Micro Missile, Zero also has a unique sub-weapon he starts with called Heat Haze. This costs 25 weapon energy to use, which is a resource indicated by this percentage number here that increases by 25% at the start of every turn at base, and creates an after image that causes Zero to deal damage again with each strike, but at around 30% effectiveness. I'm not sure what the entire raw numbers are, but it seems to be around 25 to 30% to me, so this is a very important sub-weapon that we'll effectively be using for the entire game for the most part. Anyways, we fight our first patrol dog, which barely takes any damage. Yeah, So this is mostly due to Zero's already low power stat not being high enough to break through the enemy's armor stat. I don't know how damage is calculated in this game, but there seems to be certain breakpoints that you have to reach in order for your attacks to deal decent damage. Here, Zero takes 3 whole turns to kill this one doggo, which isn't ideal. This could also be the effect of having a character who wasn't meant to start at first level be reduced to level 1, since Capcom probably didn't care about stat growths before they officially joined. Another weakness we're going to have to face are air-type enemies like these bat bones. Melee attacks have a reduced chance of landing on air-type enemies, so you have to rely on sub-weapons or party members that have ranged attacks. Having no allies, however, and only micro-missiles to work with, we needed another solution. Luckily, Zero provides a solution right from the get-go. Once your weapon energy gain reaches at least 50%, you'll be able to use his action trigger, which turns him into a fighting game character that lets you input different commands. He starts out with 3, and they all do different things. Zero Slash performs a single slash at 80% power. Zero Breaker performs a thrust at 30% power but can break through an enemy's guard. But Zero Dragon Slash is what we're mostly looking for, which is a rising slash attack that deals damage at 100% power and completely mitigates the accuracy loss of attacking air-type enemies. You know, if you can actually do the command in the first place, unlike me. There's also a bit of damage scaling involved to prevent this action trigger from dominating everything in the game. You see, your first command will always hit with full damage. Then every command after that gets reduced by 10%, bottoming out at 30% from 7 hits onward. By the way, look at how much our damage has improved on these patrol dogs at only level 3. And here's our damage sucking complete garbage against our first real fight against a Prion Chaser. Yeah, Zero starting out with such low power is actively working against us at the moment. Luckily, there is a solution for that too, in the form of hyper modes. Hyper modes are basically souped up forms that each party member can take to temporarily boost their powers and capabilities for a few turns. For Zero, he turns into his black variant armor you see from latter entries of the X series. This provides him with a plus 100% power boost, plus 50% boost to his speed, plus 25% to his weapon energy gain per turn, so plus 6 units per turn basically, and takes 25% less damage from all fire attacks. The Wikia also says that he gains a chance to counterattack enemies in this form, but that's blatantly not true since he can do that in his base form as well. They probably meant he has a greater chance to do so, and I can kinda see that. Anyways, this boosted power is why I brought up the explanation of power earlier, because plus 100% power turns this fight from this to this. Yeah. Since our damage is so incredibly low right now, there's not really any way for us to take on the boss right now, so we grinded to level 5 before making our first attempt. We meet up with X, who unfortunately forgot his X-Buster at home, so when this Hippo Presser shows up, we're forced to protect him all by ourselves. This fight is incredibly annoying, just like it was in X Solo. You're supposed to rely on X to shoot out the missile since it's an air-type unit, while Zero focuses on the head. However, unlike with X, Zero can actually deal plenty of damage to the Hippopresser's 5000 life energy fairly quickly. With Black Zero form, we're dealing almost 1000 damage to it each time we attack. Unfortunately, we're forced to cool down and defend to keep the missile from inflicting a flat 500 damage to us, reducing the damage to only 250. After that, we go back into hyper mode and action trigger for a 9-hit combo with Zero Slash, inflicting a whopping 1253 damage and breaking the Hippopresser's head. Electing to conserve our final turn of hyper mode, we cool down, abuse the temporary speed gain from using a sub-tank to heal, then defend against the missile once more. Using our final turn of hyper mode, we end up getting an 11-hit combo of our Zero Slashes against the beast, dealing another 1395 damage. Unfortunately, we're forced to cool down, but even our basic attack was dealing a decent 300 damage total. We did use a boost shield just to help protect us from Hippo Particle Cannon, then continued doing the usual rotation of defending and using sub-tanks to remain above kill range. Once we reach 100% weapon energy, however, we popped a Heat Haze and Action Trigger for a nice 12-hit combo for not actually as much damage as I would have liked, but still respectable. We do get inflicted with Bind, but we had an anti-lock to cure it, and with one final double slash in 33 turns, we send the Hippopressor to the bottom of the ocean on the first try and gain a 30% bonus for our troubles. This almost gets us to level 7 as well. Nice. Once that's been dealt with, we equip a power +1 so our power can start scaling a bit sooner, hopefully, and make our way upstairs, but not before leveling up off this random encounter. Upon reaching the top, we're greeted by Shadow, who is idolizing his new king, Epsilon. Epsilon wants to become independent or something, but Zero says that's a silly idea, which triggers Shadow and he betrays us instantly. Should have brought your X-Buster now, huh? Hey, I found it! Oh, there it is. Never mind. But before Zero could finish attacking Epsilon, the Epsilon crew show up. Meet Ferrum, Scarface, and Botos. Together they form the secret society of Epsilon that will ensure Epsilon will be the last villain in the franchise named after a letter of the Greek alphabet. Unfortunately, Zero gets blasted off the tower and landing into a lake. This means he's fine by video game logic, while X blasts his way off the tower and ouch! That's gotta hurt. Chapter 2 starts us off by showing that the fall has severely damaged X, rendering him into a coma for the foreseeable future. Meanwhile, Zero is totally fine and makes his way to the central tower to be at his bedside, swearing that he will carry on the mission without him. The word spreads across the central tower of X's hospitalization, which gives the rebellion goons time to capture the tower. Along the way, we meet a fellow bounty hunter named Spider who really wanted to fight X, but is stuck fighting us instead.
I'm Spider. It's a pleasure.
Unfortunately, Spider only brought his I'm fighting shot type damage enemies today kit, and so we managed to beat him in 2 turns by going Black Zero. He runs off to cry into a corner with Wild Django while we find our first power charge. This is actually good because we kinda need it at the moment if we're going to hit those breakpoints with our lower powered attacks. We meet Ale, who gives us his heart, then sacrifices himself for the cause while we find ourselves rescuing our favorite trio, the Spice Girls. Each of these girls have different stocks available. Saffron sells consumable items, Cumin sells weapons and sub-weapons, while Jasmine sells force metals. Like with X Solo, the only things worth buying are 3 Thunder Resist force metals to trivialize this chapter's boss fight. There's also an Ultra Fire in the room to the right of these girls, so make sure to grab that. Spider eventually shows up to tell us how we're so strong and that he wants to join our team. But I reject him and he runs off to prove himself, then gets himself captured by Wild Django. Good job! Meanwhile, Chief R thanks Zero for rescuing him. Then we're off to stop a bomb from being detonated by Wild Django because he is a coward and is afraid that the red man with the sword is coming for him. And he's right!
You have a death wish?
Wild Django has 9,000 life energy and can hit like a truck. Luckily, we equipped 3... Oh. Never mind. Turns out Zero's not healthy enough for 3. He can only equip 2 Thunder Guards, having all of Wild Django's attacks since every single one of them are all Thunder based. We're also level 9 for this fight, which normally isn't a problem, but yeah, our damage is still not very good right now. But that's why we have Power Charge. Power Charge multiplies Zero's power stat by 1.5 times, which is another correction I should make from X Solo, where I said that increases his damage by times 1.5, which is only half true. Basic math would tell you that Zero would deal 90 damage with his Z-Saber instead of 60 if that were true, but as you can see, Zero's damage with his first swing dealt 244 instead. So yeah, a very important distinction. This also makes sense as to why it only affects the first attack only if you're using a multi-hitting attack, since each hit utilizes Zero's power stat individually. Anyways, with Black Zero active, our damage gets a much needed power boost, dealing almost 1000 damage with Heat Haze or around 1200 with Power Charge. For now, Power Charge definitely seems to be the better option over Heat Haze, so we'll be making that change soon. Once we get low on life energy, we restore all our health and begin burning our Mega Fires and our 1 Ultra Fire for flat fire damage, which Wild Django is weak to. Because every other thing we can do isn't very effective right now, we do get lower than we'd like since we don't have the extra 25% thunder resistance. But after a few more Mega Fires, Wild Django dies of too much sun exposure and we get a nice 20% XP boost for beating him in 39 turns.
Ready? Fire! Hardly a fight.
As a treat, we also reached level 11. Afterwards, Spider finally shows up and is awestruck by our immense strength. Unfortunately, Spider has taken way too much damage, so he can't really join us on our adventures. With X still in a coma and Spider out of commission, Chief R goes on to bring us more bad news. He doesn't know how a computer works, so he sends us off to a POW camp to bring back the systems operator named Nana, so that she can help him with his taxes. But before we head out, we buy some water guards for the eventual water boss we're about to fight. Don't ask why I bought 5 of them, I just wanted to be sure. Unfortunately, we can't buy any weapons since Zero doesn't officially join until Chapter 6, so we're stuck with our Z-Saber for the time being. Anyways, upon reaching the camp, we're immediately met with the cowardly Steel Massimo. Turns out he lost his weapon in the war, so he can't bust the roids out of this camp. So we end up being hired as his bodyguard to do his job for him. Unfortunately, the encounters in this dungeon are a step up from the last chapter, with plenty of air-type enemies that hit hard being the worst of them. And if you're wondering why I don't just run away, well... Unlike X, who has a near-perfect chance to run away from random encounters, Zero has a near-zero chance to run away from encounters. Not 0% exactly, but it feels like it sometimes. This means that I pretty much have to take on every single random encounter I come across, which is both good and bad. It's good because of all the extra XP I'd be obtaining, but bad because of all the resources I'm forced to use throughout any given dungeon. Luckily, some enemies do drop tank energy, which helps offset the issue, but not entirely. We fight the Call of Duty squad and the Monkey Crime squad, using Black Zero to make the fights as quick and painless as possible before releasing the prisoners and heading down towards the lower levels. We pay our respects to the Reflesion door before entering a cutscene showing off Nana's cool high-tech VR setup that her loving husband Silverhorn bought for her with his own money. Unfortunately, Silverhorn grows increasingly concerned with her mental health, so he offers to take her to Disney World but gets the cold shoulder before leaving her to her devices. Poor guy. I hope he doesn't snap and become violent or anything. So after a few rough fights with some Doberman and flying fish, we find Nana being protected by her simps, which we have to fight through. Luckily for us, our Hyperform just completely dominates any given encounter we decide to use it in, so these Prions go down in 1 attack each. Wondering what all the ruckus is, Nana takes off her VR headset and scolds us for ruining her play session with some guy named Steel Massimo. Our Massimo tries to pass off as this Steel Massimo, but Nana sees right through the ploy and points us to the direction the real Steel Massimo is, only to find out that Silverhorn heard the news and had the real Steel Massimo strapped to a wall and tortured for stealing his wife. Turns out it was all a misunderstanding and the real Steel Massimo just wanted to help Nana plan for Silverhorn's birthday party. Unfortunately, Silverhorn doesn't listen to reason, so we have to put him down once and for all.
Ready to be destroyed?
At level 14 and with 2 water guards equipped, we enter the fight after heading back to base to restore all of our resources, including our hyper mode activations. Silverhorn has 17,000 life energy that we have to burn through, which Black Zero form helps a lot for. Unfortunately, Silverhorn is exceptionally dangerous at this stage, but with how few sub-tanks we have overall and how much damage he can dish out in the process. Tidal Wave deals percentage-based damage and is by far the most dangerous move for most of the fight. It reduces the entire party's current amount of life energy by 50%, meaning the more life energy you have, the more damage you'll take. You actually want to have lower life energy so that you don't take so much damage, but high enough life energy to take a couple of Silverhorn's other attacks and survive. Cryogenics is also dangerous because it has a chance to freeze us, which skips our turn for 8 turns or until Silverhorn hits us with an attack. And if that happens, we take extra damage. The best strategy you can really do is make use of Black Zero form to make yourself immune to Tidal Wave, since hyper modes are inherently immune to gravity-based attacks, and other status-related BS like Cryogenics Freeze, but with so few turns, you also want to time Zero's hyper mode for when he has maximum weapon energy built up to use Heat Haze and his action trigger all at once. With the 10-hit combo with Zero Slash, this deals 3963 damage out of his 17k life bar, which puts him into phase 2, where he uses liquid coating, allowing Silverhorn to occasionally reduce the damage of incoming attacks by 75%. He also starts using Pressure Abyss, which deals a huge chunk of damage to us with its guaranteed chance crit, but can be slightly reduced with boost shield items. Unfortunately, we kind of manage our life energy a bit poorly and get wrecked by Pressure Abyss in the end. On our second attempt, we play more conservatively with our hyper mode, so that we can maximize our damage with Black Zero's action trigger and Heat Haze combo so that we can speed up the fight just a little bit. We did manage a 12-hit combo resulting in 4477 damage, which is amazing, especially since it was right before he used liquid coating. I also take advantage of using defense when I felt Pressure Abyss creeping up, completely based on vibes. This isn't a terrible idea since defense also seems to block Tidal Wave while allowing myself to build weapon energy each turn, albeit at half the normal rate, while having all other incoming damage in the process. Even while being blocked, a 12-hit combo with Black Armor and Heat Haze dealt a solid 3826 damage, so it was still worth conserving hyper mode activations for this moment. One tip you should make use of is only use your boost items once you know you're not going to use gain hypers or otherwise use your hyper mode for the rest of the fight. This is because all boost items wear off the moment you use hyper mode and can't be reapplied while inside your hyper mode. This is why I use boost shield here rather than at the beginning of the fight. And after 59 turns and one final Mega Thunder, Silverhorn is forced to sleep with the fishies while we gain another 20% XP boost, our first build hyper, and reach level 17.
Hardly a fight.
This fight is kind of a skill check for solo runs since you don't really have a large amount of tank energy to sustain for a long time, while you're also forced to think about how to spend your hyper mode activations. You can't just sit in it the entire time. But we managed to beat him, recruit Nana, and bring Massimo to the base where he'll spend the rest of the game looking for his axe that he lost as we complete Chapter 3. Now, without a boyfriend or her best friend to play VR chat with her, Nana opts to find a new best friend to torment through Professor Godeel, an inventor who is great at constructing friends. So we buy a couple of Gain Weapon Energy +5s from the marketplace and head over to Goldeel's laboratory to begin Chapter 4. Once inside, we're immediately assaulted by guards, 2 Prion Gunners and a Prion Elite. They're not that hard to take down since our damage is looking pretty respectable now that we're a few levels higher. Once that's over, a mysterious pink Reploid named Marino, the petty bodyguard, spots me and runs off to warn Professor Goldeel that there's been a breach, to which Marino is then tasked with the job of moving Cinnamon, the latest friend he created, to a safer location. Like with X Solo, the difficulty spike is noticeable in Chapter 4, but Zero's damage is more than enough to make quick work of enemies in one shot, so it becomes a lot more bearable with Zero. There are still annoying enemies like these parasites that will max out the stats of an enemy it morphs into, but other than that, the dungeon goes pretty smoothly, all things considered. Eventually, we run into the captain of the guard, Dr. Psyche, who orders his guards to turn Zero into scrap. Fortunately, we dish out so much damage that even their healing can't keep up with my damage output, especially when going Black Zero. Once that's out of the way, Marino reaches Cinnamon to warn her about the impending kidnapping that's about to occur and explains that she needs to be moved to a safer location. So these 2 roommates take their leave. However, behind the scenes, Dr. Psyche knows Godeel's secret. Cinnamon was equipped with a Rebellion Doomsday device which is installed into her core, which Cinnamon tells Marino about, and wants it all to himself to wage war against the government. So Psyche and his defected guards hunt down Cinnamon's bodyguard Marino and takes her to a remote location to call for transport, but not before Zero shows up to kick off his giant metal head. Along the way, however, we do meet Professor Godeel, who's distraught about losing his newest friend, so we traverse the Eternal Forest, taking the weak path of course, and reviving Marino, the petty bodyguard, who now wants revenge against Dr. Psyche, but is in no condition to fight given her current injuries. We equip ourselves with a Gain Weapon Energy +5, a Decoy and Analyzer for our Force Medals, and Heat Haze and Power Charge for our sub-weapons, because there wasn't anything else I wanted to equip at the moment, so...
Perfect! You'll make a good specimen.
Dr. Psyche has 12,000 life energy and summons 3 clusters of ads called Needles, each with 400 life energy. The needles can fire 3 times for massive damage against a single target, or they can fire once with a shot type attack that has a high chance of inflicting status ailments based on the attack used, with Codebreaker being the deadliest as that has a chance to instant kill you. Dr. Psyche, meanwhile, has his own set of attacks like Doom Blaster, which hits twice but can inflict Berserk. This is an especially funny attack because Berserk status forces the character to either attack itself, an ally, or a random enemy with a basic attack, but it wears off after 8 turns or until they take damage. Since both hits of Doom Blaster come with its own chance to inflict Berserk, there's a real chance that the first hit berserks, while the second hit causes it to wear off. Anyways, 4D Throw is another deadly attack that has various properties attached to it, and he can use Needle Shower to cause his remaining needles to sacrifice themselves to boost and lower random stats of random targets on the field. If you remember, this fight was extremely overwhelming in X Solo, but I suspected it was because I wasn't being aggressive enough. To beat him, I basically used the deployment center to unlock the secret shop, then bought a bunch of ultra items to deal a flat 1000 damage to every enemy at once, keeping Dr. Psyche in a perpetual loop of summoning needles and taking damage. Here, however, I decided to be as aggressive as I could with Zero, even going as far as using his hyper mode to deal over 7000 damage with a Heat Haze boosted 12-hit combo of his action trigger, ending the fight.
You'll never beat my evolved form!
Never mind, he has a second phase. Not surprising if you've played the game before or seen the last solo run of the game. Meet Mad Nautilus. With his 10,000 life energy and 75% reduction to all attacks, he seems like he'd be pretty tough. And in a lot of ways, he is. He's an air-type enemy, meaning my accuracy is significantly lowered while fighting him. One way to get around this is to use Mega or Ultra items to bypass his barriers completely. But since we can't really do that with how few Mega and Ultra items we have to play through his gimmick. Every 3 turns, Mad Nautilus will charge up his bulkheads, then unleash 6 individual attacks that deal a whole lot of damage. Usually these are split evenly among party members, though not always, meaning we unfortunately have to get filled with all 6 shots to the face. Afterwards, his bulkheads remain open until the start of his next turn, where they will close and the process repeats. Best way to get around this is by defending the turn before he blasts your face, so that you don't die or require healing. After that, we just hyper mode and use our action trigger for Zero Dragon Slash to bypass the accuracy loss for a ton of damage. Even when we mess up our second action trigger, a 4-hit attack still gave us almost 3000 damage. And after a third action trigger, Mad Nautilus becomes Knight's Dinner in 21 turns and nets us an extra 30% XP boost as we level up to 22.
Take this! My life's work!
Hardly a fight.
With Psyche out of the way, Cinnamon wants to become our new friend, so we tell her about Nana and how she's looking for a new VR chat buddy, which turns out to be Cinnamon's favorite game of all time, so Go Deal approves. Marino, meanwhile, still has a contract to protect Cinnamon from all dangers, so she comes as well, thus ending Chapter 4. Chapter 5 begins with Redips telling us about an anomaly at point A6, which happens to be the Ulfat factory. So we make our way there to discover that it's a fire level, so we buy a fire guard from the marketplace to keep us cooled down. Welcome to one of the most boring dungeons in the game. I'm just gonna skip over the annoying mechanics and go right over to the encounters you'll face in this level. There's a lot of different Prions here, most notably Prion soldiers, nurses, shielders, and tanks. For X Solo, the shielders and soldiers were the worst of the lot. For Zero, none of them are really a challenge for him. The shielders are already weak to melee attacks, so Zero just eats them for breakfast. And the soldiers don't really have a chance to block Zero's attacks like they do with X. The nurses, meanwhile, will heal you if it's the last enemy alive, while the tanks like to slather you with hot motor oil to make you weak to fire attacks. You do fight some fire turtles, which do pack a punch, but they also have a weakness to melee damage in a way. If you attack it enough times, its shell cracks, allowing shot type damage to no longer be reduced, and preventing it from using its shell shock ability, which normally does a ton of damage. There's also some fire type versions of the blowfish enemies that we fought in Chapter 3, but they're not too bad to deal with at this point. Also worth noting that I did upgrade Zero's action trigger for performing 300 command arts just after defeating these Prion soldiers. This unlocks Zero Wave Slash, which performs a downward thrust at a power of somewhere between 50% and 200% power. It's the potential man of the lot, but I don't really get too much use out of it. At some point, a suspicious looking Reploid shows up, so we kill him. Just kidding, it's Axel. He's here because he heard Zero would show up, and he was right. He also wants to join our team, but we say no, and we never see him again. For now. After that, we reach the conveyor room of conveyor belts that convey us over to the other side through a series of belts made for conveying things over to the other side of the conveyor room so that we can get to the other side. Like a conveyor belt. Boring puzzle aside, the encounters aren't too terrible, as our damage is so high we can basically one-shot the Prion shielders with very little problems. Once that's out of the way, we encounter a cutscene showing Zero rapidly approaching Mach Gentra's location. He's the boss of this area, and he's shaking in his booties as he realizes all his security measures had no effect on the lone red Maverick Hunter, and immediately scurries off a couple rooms away as soon as we enter his boss chamber. So we chase him to his real boss chamber, equipping 3 fire guards and double heat haze, and proceed to face Mach Gentra himself. Fun fact before that, however, you're supposed to actually recruit Zero here, which normally would give him an extra heat haze and the Z-Saber Plus, which is slightly stronger than the normal Z-Saber. However, for whatever reason, the Z-Saber Plus never showed up, but the extra heat haze did. I guess it has something to do with the way the game handles adding and removing party members, and since Zero was already in the party, he never got added again, which means his new stuff doesn't get added or something? I don't know. Anyways, here's Mach Gentra.
So, you've come. It is all for the ideal.
This fight is pretty straightforward. Maki Boy here starts the fight with 2 goons, a Prion tank and a Prion soldier. When you kill one or both, he can use Gentle Call to refresh his goons into random Prions chosen from tanks, soldiers, and shielders, though he doesn't favor using Gentle Call nearly as much if only one of the Prions are dead. After that, Mach Gentra has some strong fire moves in the form of Giga Fire and Flames of Gehenna, which are rendered almost useless due to my 3 fire guards. You really only have Smash to worry about here since it can deal a lot of combat damage. Just like Mad Nautilus, however, this fight isn't nearly as hard as you would expect. Just wait for your action trigger to reach 100%, go Black Zero, then double Heat Haze into Zero Dragon Slash spam for... Okay, don't judge me for messing up so bad. Oh my god, that's a lot of damage. That was just for 3 hits? For the record, Mach Gentra has 28,000 life energy. If I was better at Street Fighter, I feel like this fight would already be over by now. Overall, this fight goes pretty smoothly, all things considered. As long as the Prion soldier doesn't dip below half health, you don't have to worry about it healing Mach Gentra for a quarter of his max HP with life gain 25. After an 8-hit combo with a mix of Zero Slashes and Dragon Slashes, we end up with a whopping 10k damage, enough to give Mach Gentra a crash landing in 48 turns, while gaining a plus 20% XP bonus, putting us at level 27.
This is it! Take this! Maverick Hunters. Too powerful.
Hardly a fight.
Now, before we continue on, I would like to address something that I'm sure some of you have noticed already. So, in X Solo, X would gobble up all the experience for himself until Marino joins. Then she would take some of the XP X would gain. This gets exasperated once Cinnamon joins, then once again once Axel joins. As a result, X would be kept at a relatively lower level throughout the rest of the game. And considering that we're a true Zero solo run without extra party members, combined with the fact that Zero can't really run from battles, meaning I have to fight every battle which nets me more XP, the result ends up with Zero being about 4 levels higher than X after defeating Mach Gentra. This doesn't sound like much, but consider how much level influences a lot of old school RPGs. It's kind of a similar situation here too, but what can you do? Anyways, after Mach-Gentra dies, we have to fight hordes of Prions. You don't actually need to kill each wave of Prions, just survive a certain number of turns. But we fight them anyway just for the heck of it until Mach-Gentra comes back from the dead one last time in a last-ditch effort to save Zero. What a nice guy.
It's so sad that I, Mach-Gentra, am about to die of Ligma. Who the heck is Mach-Gentra? Ligma balls.
And with that, Chapter 5 is complete. Chapter 6 starts off with X waking up from his coma, but still unable to fight due to a permanent leg injury. This leaves X and company distraught as Zero vows to finish the mission without him and makes his way to the Gimiala mines to investigate a strange signal. But before that, let's check out the secret shop in the Legrano ruins after obtaining the Legrano key. The secret shop is run by the Spice Girls, and their stock is completely different this time. The main things you're after here are the Ultra items and Boost items being sold by Saffron. However, Cumin is selling a relatively cheap ultimate weapon for Zero, the Soul Saber. In terms of single target damage, it does pack a punch by granting Zero 50 power and serves as a decent defense boost compared to the normal Z-Saber at the cost of a bit of speed. What's unique about this weapon is that its damage gets boosted when Zero's life energy reaches 25% or less. It's kind of strange how this weapon works. The damage boost scaling seems to start at 25% of your life energy and increases as it gets lower, up to double its power. So at 25% life energy, there's no real increase here. But at 1%, there is a huge increase. Unfortunately, this doesn't affect your action trigger, just your normal attack, but it does easily out-damage your Z-Saber if you consistently stay at low health. I didn't really use this because I wasn't really comfortable being low health all the time, but you might want to use this weapon if you're looking for a more high-risk, high-reward type weapon. As for the other weapons Zero has available now, the Elemental Sabers aren't that good for normal encounters because they only attack once. Compared to Zero's normal Z-Saber, it just lacks damage unless you're attacking something on weakness. The power boost is the only good thing since power does increase the damage your action trigger does in general. Once we're finished goofing around, we make our way to the Gimiala mines, which isn't terrible. There are some new flying enemies which can be annoying, but there's also plenty of Metars that die very easily to our Z-Saber. We also learn about Shadow the Square Bob's favorite crash game.
It's about time.
This is a very straightforward dungeon. For the first part, you just have to kill this scripted encounter with some rush loaders, then use the booster parts you get from them to break some rocks leading to the controls for the elevator, which unlocks the next floor. Simple enough. Once you get to the lower levels, however, we're immediately greeted by Shadow the Stinky Pete as he yaps about Super Force Metal and tries to kill X. Hey, wait a minute, why are you here? It would appear that while we were shopping, X got too eager to prove himself as an asset and went off on his own to fight Shadow, and proceeded to get his ass kicked. Axel and Spider meanwhile tried to follow X to get him to get back into bed, but wanted to see what would happen instead. Then Zero shows up and kicks his ass in return.
I'll tear all of you to little pieces!
This fight is kind of a cakewalk. Without item capture to steal from him, we have no reason to add any kind of extra challenge by trying to steal his gain hyper, unlock limiter, or his build items. So we just maintain our life energy like we did with Silverhorn due to his gravity-like attacks from Fragmented Cannon and Pulverizing Cannon. We go Black Zero and nuke Shadow the Bingo Bango Bongo for over 9,000 damage with a 7-hit 0/combo. forcing him to break shield and try to kill us faster. For context, Shadow has 18,000 life energy, so that was slightly over half his entire crunch bar. Fortunately, Hyper Mode allows us to ignore gravity-based mechanics, so fragmenting cannon doesn't bother us. After phase 1 ends, Shadow decides to get a little bit more serious. With 28,000 life energy this time, he starts the fight by charging his pulverizer cannon. Fortunately, we still have 3 more rounds of Hyper Mode, so we just
I'll get you for this!
deal a whole bunch of damage. Yeah, this is what I meant when I said that the double heat haze is just the best damage option for Zero than power charge. With 2 heat hazes, you can use them both and still action trigger, which is what caused all the damage from earlier. Unlike X Solo, there's not really any challenge here for someone as strong as Zero. Even when my hyper mode runs out, I'm still dealing so much damage. As long as I don't miscalculate my healing, this fight is basically free. And after one final double slash in 18 turns, Shadow Moses is sent to the Shadow Realm and I get a 30% XP bonus out of it and reach level 30.
I'll get you for this! How could this be?
Hardly a fight.
We tell X to go home, but Shadow, the lead singer of Sting, tries to kill Zero with the cheap shot. Good thing Spider was here to attract the bullets from us. Now with 2 injured comrades, we all agree to never be creative again as Spider, X, and I guess Axel head back to base to play poker. The rest of the dungeon goes very smoothly. You play a minigame where you match the different color axes with the Reploid to unlock the next floor, then fight a bunch of globs to unlock the elemental door of elements. Fun fact that I forgot to mention in X Solo, while all the globs have different weaknesses and tend to absorb their own elements, the liquid globs are special. Normally they have 1500 life energy, half as much as the fire and plasma globs, but take significantly less damage from all attacks. You can bypass this with an Ultra Thunder for a flat 1500 damage by hitting its weakness, but if you have an ice weapon, like the Ice Buster or Ice Missile sub-weapon, or Ultra or Mega Blizzard, the liquid glob will resist the attack, but will become frozen, allowing you to damage the enemy normally. Just a neat trick in case you ever struggle with them. Once the elemental door is out of the way, we do some setting up for Incentus. I equip myself with the Ice Saber because remember what I said about elemental sabers being garbage outside of weakness damage? Turns out Incentus' weaknesses are humongous, as hitting his weaknesses deals 200% damage instead of the usual 150% most bosses have. This unironically makes the elemental saber your best choice of gear because
Get what's coming to you!
Needless to say, with one of each elemental guard, this fight is a total joke. With only 36,000 life energy, we just completely wreck him in 15 turns, and escape from the mines with no casualties and a 50% XP boost, putting us at level 33.
Don't move! How could this be?
Hardly a fight.
Unfortunately, Spider succumbs to his hand injury and passes away, so we never see him for the rest of the game, which is a cruel way to end Chapter 6. Chapter 7 begins with Chief R telling us to go to the Onovan Desert, or Vanalia Desert as we refer to it after this one scene, to stop the jamming that's been preventing us from contacting Colonel Redips. But before we do that, we buy the best weapon in the game until we reach the endgame, the Z Rapier. Imagine the damage of the Z Saber, only it hits 3 times instead of twice. This further increases the damage output of Zero's already stupid high damage to ungodly levels. Mix this with double heat haze and you'll never need another weapon again. Once we're done shopping, we head into the Vanalia Desert, follow these here cables, get enraptured by the beautiful Ferrum, get trapped in quicksand, and find ourselves in the second part of the dungeon. The enemies here do spike in difficulty a bit, but since we have our new Z Rapier to catch us up in the damage department and a few higher levels than X was in his solo mission, the spike doesn't really affect us. As for how the rest of the chapter goes, we do find some build items, including a second build hyper which we can take to increase our hyper mode activations to 5 turns. Once we reach the elevator room to the upper floors, we take a bit of a detour. See, this room is the only room where gold bladers spawn. They have a chance to drop good luck force medals, which increases the drop rates of items that have a drop rate of higher than 1% by 3% per good luck equipped. While these can stack, we're here for the more common item drops that these guys have. Item capture. That's right. Without Spider giving us his free item capture or without going through the Eternal Forest, the earliest you can get this sub-weapon is right here in Chapter 7. While we will be using this sub-weapon to steal from bosses later, there is a little bit of a problem worth fixing right now. Remember those Prion Elites in Chapter 4? Well, they have an item that you can steal called Exodus, and what this force medal does is it allows you to flee any non-boss battle or non-event combat guaranteed. Up until now, I've basically been doing every single encounter I come across because Zero just has such a poor chance to escape, so this will essentially make the rest of the run much shorter going forward. Once back to the little base on the desert, we grinded for a Hawkeye sub-weapon to make air-type enemies a non-issue for the rest of the game, while also doing what we did for X Solo and align the lasers to the telephone boxes and the thingamajig on the wall to power up the consoles on the floor above, to deactivate all of the jammers and gain access to the top floor, where we meet one of the 3 main cadres of the Rebellion Army, Botos.
Time for a little lesson in agony.
So, as many of you might know, I made a terrible blunder in my X Solo run where I mistakenly thought that Botos was an air-type unit. Don't worry, I did not make that mistake here. Botos has 40,000 life energy and summons 2 Qubit adds that have a chance to heal him with life gain 25 if he drops below a certain amount of life energy, probably 50% in my experience. For X, the problem was dealing enough damage to outdamage the healing Botos would receive while surviving the onslaught of Botos' attacks. But for Zero...
Take this!
We deal so much more damage with a good enough combo as Black Zero, and there's the healing. Fortunately, we don't even need our action trigger to outpace his healing because just a basic attack with Heat Haze deals over 10,000 damage on average anyway. And in case you're wondering, I am using the Generate sub-weapon that you can obtain via deployment, which just grants you a flat plus 20% weapon energy, which is really fun for when you want to use your action trigger very often. Anyways, we defeat Botos in 16 turns and gain a 30% bonus to XP. However, I wasn't satisfied. I felt something speak into my brain at that moment.
You can go faster through.
So I reset the game, equipped Ice Saber since Botos takes 150% from water, and I tried to kill him with 1 action trigger. With 15 hits from Zero Slash and Heat Haze, I did almost enough to one-shot him. I'm sure if I went with Zero Wave Slash and got really lucky, or enough Dragon Slashes, it can be done, but I wasn't going to waste my time with optimization. Needless to say, we won in 14 turns instead, increasing our XP boost to plus 50%, I guess.
Ow, ow, ow,
Hardly a fight.
This nets me enough XP to level me up to 37 as we take Botus' Super Force Medal, let him escape after making us look, then contact base to let them know that we took care of the interference, thus ending Chapter 7. Chapter 8 starts off with Professor Godil telling us to go to the Force Metal Refinement Plant to obstruct the Rebellion's Force Metal operations, since Super Force Metal takes more Force Metal to make than the amount of water generative AI takes to spit out a single terrible image. But before we set out, Z-Saber++ is for sale along with a double tooth. Neither of these are better than the Z-Rapier, so we're not even going to talk about them. We also buy one water resist before heading to the Melda ore plant. First things first, we loot everything in the first room while we look for a specific encounter with this frozen degraver. He has a very important item for us to steal that I never bothered doing in X Solo because I honestly forgot it existed. Luckily, I didn't forget this time and stole his Vengeful Counter. This is a very powerful sub-weapon that costs 25% weapon energy and guarantees that you counter the next time you're hit with an attack that would trigger a counter. This usually means any shot type or combat type attack, but there are some that just don't trigger counters ever at all. Basically, if it can be countered, Vengeful Counter will always trigger. In terms of raw damage numbers, this does potentially the most damage in the game if we're talking about sub-weapons, because it's essentially a full attack if it triggers as opposed to a 50% power increase from power charge. Another neat quirk about Vengeful Counter is the fact that you can stack two of them at max, and they both stay active until they're triggered. This is a very important sub-weapon for solo runs for a few battles, and is most certainly the only reason we beat some encounters in the first place. Also, fun fact about the Degraver, if you use the warm-up item to cure it of its frozen status, it'll be grateful, leave, and has a 50% chance to give you the Beam Wander S weapon, and a 100% chance to give you Tank Energy 100. As for the level itself, well, just like X Solo, this is the shortest level in the game. It contains reskins of various enemies we've already encountered, and we don't really have much trouble finding them or running away thanks to the Exodus Force Medal we stole last chapter. You don't even have to do the whole taking pictures for Godil thing after the first one. The only required picture you need to take is the very last one you come across in the room with the terminal that allows you to proceed further into the dungeon. Turns out, Godil only needed two specific pictures to determine that the Rebellion army possesses a missile. So, as we did before in X Solo, we make our way to disarm the missile. Unfortunately, we do still have to do Botos' stupid minigame, which is just pick the correct Botos and fight his qubits before he runs away and hides behind a locked door, forcing us to go into the boss room and fight Ferrum instead.
Don't be shy. Step right up.
For this boss fight, I equipped a gain weapon energy +5, a light as a feather for some reason, and a single water resist for her upcoming water attacks. And for my weapons, a Hawkeye to hit her in the air, my Z-Rapier, and an item capture for her build Hyper. To say that Ferrum was easy is a bit of an understatement. She's actually the easiest boss in the entire run. There's really nothing to say about this fight at all. And with a 16 hit combo, action trigger in Black Zero mode dealing 15k damage, and normal attacks dealing almost 3k damage on average out of her 50k health bar while she's barely even able to scratch me, I finished her off in 17 turns with a 30% XP boost.
Don't move!
That felt good. You're really something else.
Hardly a fight.
The rest of the dungeon goes the same as X Solo, it's just a lot of backtracking and Boto's dying to Spider while we're left wondering where the Super Force Medal from the warhead actually went, thus completing Chapter 8. Chapter 9 starts off with Hunter HQ being assaulted by Epsilon's third and final cadre, Scarface. He came here to challenge X to a fight, but since he's still recovering from a broken ankle, Zero steps up to the plate and fights in his stead.
Show me the extent of your power.
Scarface is a pretty interesting fight for Zero. This fight has Scarface starting with 37,500 life energy, way less than Ferrum, but comes with the unique gimmick of guarding against and potentially countering the previous type of attack he was previously hit by. So if he was hit by a shot type attack, the next time he's hit by a shot type attack, he'll block it, reducing the damage of it by about 75%, and has a chance to counter with a basic attack. This does not apply to elemental damage or sub-weapons, however. This means that despite technically having a way to deal shot type damage using something like force missiles, it doesn't actually count. What this means for Zero, who only has combat attacks otherwise, is... yeah. Zero has no way of actually dealing with Scarface's mechanic outside of brute forcing it, since once he gets that first lick in, Scarface just continues to reduce every instance of Zero's attacks down to 25%. Luckily, Black Zero doesn't really care about this damage reduction, since he's still doing an average of about 2,000 damage total. I did try to use Zero Breakthrough since it apparently breaks an enemy's guard at the cost of only being 30% power, but it didn't seem to deal that much damage overall. Honestly, a basic attack would have dealt more damage. And in case you were wondering, yeah, I did bring a Reverse Thunder Force Medal that I got from the deployment center for this fight, which lets me drain all electric attacks from Scarface, meaning the only two attacks that can damage me is his basic attack and Electro Breaker, which I've noticed he appears to spam relentlessly once he drops to low health. But with enough brute force and patience, and 60 turns, we force Scarface to kneel to our prowess, and somehow earn a 20% XP boost on our first try.
Commander Epsilon!
Hardly a fight.
I also want to stress that this fight took about 11 minutes as opposed to maybe 5 or 6 minutes other fights would have taken, strictly because of the damage reduction we were forced to deal with. Anyways, once that's finished, Scarface flees. We track down the Rebellion headquarters and prepare to go on a solo raid by buying a gain weapon energy plus 10 and equip my Exodus and speed plus 3 force medals so that our speed can become the funny number before proceeding to the Grave Ruins base. Once we take out these Prion Epsilons in their scripted encounter, we unlock the gate to Epsilon, equip ourselves with gain weapon energy plus 10, reverse thunder, and minus metal 20 to keep ourselves out of alert status, while we use heat haze and iron capture for our sub-weapons, something we didn't do for X Solo. When preparing to face Epsilon, however, Scarface shows up, wanting his salty runback, so...
I have nothing to say. Fight!
The fight is technically the same as before, only now he has slightly more life energy at 42,500. He also technically has less armor and shield, but more speed, but those don't really matter. Honestly, I had a very funny idea I wanted to try, so instead of continuing my first attempt, I soft reset to see how much damage I could deal to Scarface with a Heat Haze 12 combo 0/ in Black Zero form. Turns out it was 18k. This would make the fight demonstrably shorter. As for why I'm using Black Zero on Scarface, I knew I had enough XP to level up from this fight. And even if I didn't, I already had 9 gain hypers with at least a couple left over gain hypers I left behind in Chapter 8. Also, it did turn out that the 0/ are just better than Zero Breakthrough, as you can see with the 4.7k damage I did with them. Honestly, I kind of wonder how the Z Ichimoji weapon would do against Scarface, since it does have armor penetration, but...
I was weak.
We defeat Scarface in 23 turns on our first try, quote unquote, and prepare to face Epsilon at level 41. For context, we were level 31 in X Solo, which is 10 levels below. This is important because you're about to see one of the big downsides for making a true solo run, and why having XP leechers might be a good thing if you want a harder run overall.
Kneel before the mighty Epsilon.
As usual, Epsilon starts off with using Meta Crush to reduce our hit points to a singular 1. So we have to spam our tank energy 50s and 25s to keep ourselves above kill range for his other attacks. Most notably Nova Impact, which deals a fixed amount of damage, which ranges somewhere between 1029 and 1435 damage. I don't know why these numbers specifically, but that's what the Wikia says, and I have never seen it do below or above that amount of damage, even with boost shields, despite it supposedly dealing shot type damage. Our main goal is reducing Epsilon's hit points in Phase 1 so that we can focus on stealing during Phase 2, which he has gain hyper and build hyper available. This can be a bit difficult since Epsilon has a chance to reduce incoming attacks by 75%, and if you aren't careful, you can mess up your turn order if you go for an action trigger and die, which did happen once. On my second attempt, I just didn't bother with Black Zero and just focused on boosting all of my stats instead. Yeah, I would get a plus 50% boost to my power as opposed to plus 100% power that Black Zero provides, but having a consistent plus 50% speed boost and armor boost was much more important. And it's not like we couldn't fix that later, so... Anyways, once Phase 2 starts, we focus purely on stealing his gain and build hyper as he spams Beta Crush and Nova Impact for the rest of the fight. And once we obtain both, we now focus on Epsilon's gimmick. During Phase 2, Epsilon reduces all damage he takes, outside of elements of course, by 75% and recovers 50% of his current life energy at the start of each of his turns due to putting his Super Force Metal into overdrive. If he takes 10 hits, the barrier weakens and only sometimes blocks damage, and another 20 hits nullifies the barrier and life regen completely. For X, the solution was to use his Charge Collider action trigger while in X-Fire mode, since it dealt 12 hits at 100% weapon energy. For Zero, however, Heat Haze and Z Rapier gives him 6 hits on a basic attack. If I elected to use a second Heat Haze, then that would have been 9 hits instead. So every free turn I had, I would just make sure to go for Heat Haze and a basic attack until his barrier finally drops, to which I decided to finish the fight with Unlock Limiter to give myself 3 turns of enormous damage, slaying Epsilon in 59 turns, with a nice 20% XP boost to boot.
Unbelievable!
Incredible.
Yeah, do you see how much difference those 10 levels made? Epsilon just didn't stand a chance. It's kind of a shame really, but hey, a win's a win. But with Epsilon defeated and the Super Force Medal in Redip's hands, Chapter 9 is complete. But of course that doesn't mean we're finished yet. There are 2 super bosses we have yet to defeat before continuing forward. But first, I grinded up around 5 unlock limiters from the rush loaders in the Gimmiola mines and prepared to fight Reflasion, my old nemesis from X Solo. The setup I used for this fight was 2 gain weapon energy plus 10s and a minus metal 20 for maximum weapon energy generation. For my main loadout, however, I went for a Heat Haze and Vengeful Counter.
Who are you strangers?
Once the fight starts, I go Black Zero and deal as much damage as I can to Reflation first. Then I made sure to set up my vengeful counters whenever possible. This is because when any of the Belladonnas accompanying her trigger your counter, they don't actually grow their stats from the damage, which can be useful if you deal enough damage to bypass their passive healing, which is 25% of their current health. Luckily, Reflesion is the one to trigger my counter and takes enough damage to die to my follow-up turn. From there, I could just rely on Vengeful Counter to kill the Belladonnas, but I dealt enough damage that I didn't need to, thus defeating the girls first try. We do unlock the Ultimate Armor Hyper Mode, but we can't do anything with it, so... The next super boss is Duckbill Mole and his Nuguru D's Nuts.
Ready to tangle with Duckbill Mole?
If you have reverse fire, equip it. If not, fire resist is plenty for this fight. Also equip infinite resist and a minus metal 20 so you don't get your stats lowered by his kamikaze drill attack. Other than that, have a way to deal water damage, such as with Ice Saber Plus, which becomes available at this point of the game. Their gimmick is very simple. Whenever they take water damage, they lose access to their Quake Hammer and Mantle Assault attacks, leaving them with only puny Mega Fire as their main source of damage. However, they can warm themselves up using Ultra Fire to regain health and access to their stronger moves again, so just keep suppressing their attacks with your Ice Saber Plus and you'll beat them in no time. Like, you literally don't have to worry about this fight since their 600 plus healing can't even out heal Zero's 45k damage. Yeah. Defeating these guys nets you the Absolute Zero Hyper Mode, which is extremely powerful and makes Zero look incredibly edgy and cool. That being said, we probably won't be using that until post-game, just because Chapter 10 would be way too easy otherwise. Chapter 10 starts us off with everyone waiting for the airship to arrive to take everyone to Waffle House. X feels bad about not being able to help Zero on his mission, but Zero assures him that it was nothing to worry about. Axel says something, but I wasn't paying attention to what it was. Then bullets rain down from above, killing Chief R. Zero retreats to the Far East HQ, while X and friends defend the central tower to face the source of all this commotion, Colonel Redips himself. I know I kind of glossed over the whole Redips is actually evil and was actually Spider plot twist this time around, but in the grand scheme of things, it didn't really matter since they were both going to join the landfill department after I'm done with them. The Spice Girls make a return in this chapter, as they sell their Chapter 10 stock instead of their secret shop stock. So if you need to update your gear, this is where you'll do it if you forgot to do so back at home. I didn't need to, so we blow past them, go up one of the many elevators, and prepare to fight Wild Django again in the obligatory boss refight portion of the game. Like with X Solo, Wild Jangle's a complete pushover when you equip Reverse Thunder, since all of his attacks deal thunder damage. He's supposed to switch to spamming Codebreaker and Hell Gravity after 50 turns, but if your fight with Wild Jangle lasts that long, you're probably doing something wrong. He does get a couple stronger thunder moves to replace his older ones, but they don't really matter because, again, they deal thunder damage. I do start my first attempt using Absolute Zero just to show off what it can do, however. His sub-weapons are replaced with Killer Left and Brutal Right, and both of them deal water-based damage, while his main weapon is a big ol' kick called Crimson End. His action trigger also becomes Calamitous Arts, which lets you deal huge damage by inputting the commands shown on screen, Simon Says style. Other than that, his stat changes are much different than Black Zero's. To remind everyone, Black Zero grants a 100% power boost, 50% speed boost, 25% weapon energy gain boost, and a 25% reduction to fire damage he takes. Meanwhile, Absolute Zero grants 50% more life energy, a 100% power boost, 50% speed boost, weapon energy gain boost of 50%, and takes half damage from water. On top of that, he becomes a flying type unit to boot. Those wings aren't just for show. Regardless, you can see how much damage Absolute Zero can do without any sort of buffs like Power Charge or Heat Haze. 27,000 out of Wild Jangle's 64,500 life energy is incredible for a single unit to deal, and with just a few sub-weapons and basic attacks, he goes down very quickly. But let's do this fight the correct way. On our second attempt, we opt for Black Zero instead, to make the fight just a little bit more challenging. Never mind. We managed to deal even more damage than Absolute Zero. Well, at least Absolute Zero has survivability going for it, right? Anyways, after that, we recover at the Nurse Reploid up ahead and do a bit of farming. What for? For our new Z-Saber upgrade, of course. There are these insect-type Reploids called Red Stingers that have a 1% chance to drop a Z-Rapier Plus, which is objectively more powerful than the normal Z-Rapier, obviously. It takes a while, but it finally drops, and you can see for yourself just how much stronger it is. While defensively it's worse than most other weapons, its plus 40 power in comparison to the original Z-Rapier's 12 power is a huge upgrade in and of itself, and is a pretty noticeable uptick in damage in combat. Regardless, Silverhorn is next, and we equip ourselves with Reverse Water, gain weapon energy plus 10, and minus metal 10 to keep ourselves out of alert status. For my main weapons, I opted not to use Thunder Saber, and just stick with my upgraded Z-Rapier along with Generator and Heat Haze. This fight shouldn't be that hard as his water attacks get drained by my Reverse Water. Tidal Wave isn't as deadly as it was back in Chapter 3, since we have more than enough sub-tanks to keep up. So we just go Black. Okay, so this happens a few times. I'm so used to fast clicking hyper mode and going into Black Zero that I forget that Absolute Zero becomes the top option. So I revert back to normal mode, then go Black Zero this time, and just proceed to wail on Silverhorn until he's turned into so much scrap. Next up, we have Mad Nautilus, who goes down just as easy as his Chapter 4 counterpart. With my Block All Force Metal that I remembered this time, unlike with X Solo, Mad Cocktail is a non-issue. So it's all about waiting for his bulkheads to drop and... okay, never mind. Reset. Once his bulkheads open up, you just go Black Zero and action trigger him to death after using Hawkeye. He only has 38,500 life energy this time around, so if the first one doesn't kill him, the second one will definitely do the trick. And even if you don't want to use your action trigger, your basic attacks deal more than enough damage to keep the fight going until you slice through Mad Nautilus's shell to reach the delicious innards underneath. It's also worth noting that defeating these bosses nets you a build stat item to consume, so I'm just slowly getting progressively stronger with each boss fight I kill at this point. Next on the docket is Mach Gentra, who is just as simple as his Chapter 5 counterpart, if not simpler due to Hawkeye being available. This time we do go into Black Zero form. In fact, Mach Gentra is so easy that I didn't even bother to heal for this fight. Meanwhile, Incentus was... well...
Get what's coming to you! Ha ha ha! Ho! No! Ha ha ha! Ha ha ha! Ha ha ha! This is it!
I know there was an unnecessary amount of setting up going on here, and truth be told, if I had a different elemental saber to go into action trigger sooner rather than waiting for Incentus to go into water form, this could have been so much easier. But I wanted to showcase just how much easier this run has been compared to X Solo, and I am confident that my level is at least 70% of the reason why. These refights just don't have anything on us at this point. With those fights out of the way, however, it was time to progress forward and face a new boss, Depth Dragoon.
I'll take you on.
Being a thunder-based enemy, we reprised our Wild Django strats and proceeded to delete him from this plane of existence. While he doesn't have a full roster of thunder attacks like Wild Django does, his non-thunder based attacks don't really pack a punch against us either. Really, about the only thing we have to watch out for is Hell Gravity, which doesn't affect us while we're in hyper mode. And his boosts only serve to be a minor annoyance than anything else by prolonging the fight longer than it needs to. On the bright side, I did manage to create a new mix of Massimo's theme by doing this. Honestly, Generator is the underrated MVP of this run, since with the amount of weapon generation I already had from Gain Weapon Energy plus 10 and Hyper Mode, I was able to command arts every turn, which was much more worth it than using basic attacks at this point, considering the amount of damage that I was putting out. In fact, this was so effective that it only took 10 turns to beat Depth Dragoon, which netted me a 50% XP bonus.
It seems I have lost.
With Depth Dragoon out of the way, it was time to fight Colonel Redis himself as he spouts nonsense about becoming the brand new villain of the series by creating a never-before-seen Greek letter of the alphabet. What that is, no one can really say, but since Epsilon was supposed to be the final villain named after the Greek letter of the alphabet, and no one else, we decided to put an end to his scheme right here and now.
Foul mavericks, you will perish!
Unfortunately, I still didn't have reverse fire yet, so fire resist for his vicious assault attack is gonna have to do. Besides that, block all will be very useful to avoid being insta-killed by ballistic, and a minus metal 20 for good measure. I do equip Hawkeye instead of Generator because the red hubcaps he summons are air-type enemies, and I'm going to need to kill at least one of them so we aren't reprising the strat we used for X Solo, especially now that we don't have to worry about being one-shot. We get the first turn, so we immediately turn into Black Zero to deal as much damage as we can before he summons his red hubcaps and begins spamming defense. Oh, he's already using Vicious Assault. Hang on, let me do some math. Okay, so first turn's total damage is 13,560 damage, and the second turn's damage is about 13,001 damage. Combined, that's 26,561 damage out of his total of 51,500 life energy. Yeah, that's just over half his health when he starts using Vicious Assault and defends a lot less. So we literally just bypassed his main gimmick in just 2 attacks. Yeah, I don't think there's much more to say. Redips can't touch me and he gets humbled in 9 turns.
So it takes more to beat you.
Hardly a fight.
Not liking where this is going, Redips retreats to the mysterious Golden Throne where he proceeds to transform into Space Palkia for one final fight. For our final setup, we go for gain weapon energy plus 10, block all to counter Memento Mori, and minus metal 20 for, you know at this point. For our weapons, we forego Heat Haze for item capture and Hawkeye since we do want Super Force Metal Fragment Beta if nothing else.
I shall rule over all, for I am invincible.
While there's nothing we can really do for Redips' first phase because he has 999,999 life energy and regains it all every turn unless you temporarily put his right Super Force Metal out of commission, we at least try to steal Super Force Metal Fragment Alpha, but of course this doesn't work out the way we want it to, so we once again wait 10 turns until the timer runs out just like we did with X Solo. Once we do, we let our girl Farum take out Great Redips' healing factor and proceed to the true final boss fight.
Meddling insects!
We start out by taking out Redips' left Super Force Metal to take care of his barrier, then proceed to go Black Zero and steal his Super Force Metal Fragment Beta. Fun fact, I'm thoroughly convinced at this point that the beta version has a 100% steal rate, and the Wikia is just lying to me about it as I continue to steal it first try. Anyways, with a 16-hit combo of Zero Slash, we can deal 22,000 damage out of his much lower 72,500 life energy. So then we... Okay, so I may have miscalculated how much damage Redips can actually do in this fight. When you have so much defense by default, getting hit by deep impact is like getting hit with a dose of reality. It's a very humbling experience after having a free ride for so long, needless to say. On my second attempt, nothing really changed except this time I made sure my health wasn't low enough that a deep impact could finish me off. And with a 17-hit combo from Zero Slash, we deal 22,000 damage and absolutely dominate the supposedly great Redips.
Take this!
Impossible! Absolutely impossible!
With Redips finally defeated, and Central Tower seemingly destroyed or something, Ferrum takes it upon herself to make sure Command Mission 2 never sees the light of day and blows herself up along with all the pre-alpha work of the game. Of course, if you know the game, or watch the entirety of X Solo, you know that just beating the game doesn't mean completing it, so we still have one more gauntlet of super bosses to get through. With the Central Tower key obtained for beating the game, we load back to Chapter 10 and make our way to the special sealed zone where we will face 9 new adversaries, the Tail Clan. Normally, this is a series of really tough boss fights with different gimmicks, but they can be cheesed very easily with Ultimate Armor X and Absolute Zero. In a solo run, however, we only have access to Absolute Zero, which can make things a bit tricky for us. But first, let's take a stab at One Tail, the first of the Tail Clan crew.
I challenge you to a fight.
One Tail has the same amount of life energy as Great Redips, 72,500. He also has a healing factor of 50% of his current life energy at the start of each of his turns, and packs quite a punch with his attacks. This fight can be pretty annoying under normal circumstances, but all you have to do is go into... Go into Black Zero mode and double heat haze him twice in a row. I was actually kinda lucky and managed to get Zero's counter chance to proc without Vengeful Counter, so that really helped. At this point, my speed was high enough that the speed bonus from Black Zero allowed me to take double turns, which increased my odds that I would be able to dish out enough damage to outpace One Tail's healing factor. Sure enough, after a few turns, One Tail's dies without any problems. Except I wanted to take the fight again, but this time with Vengeful Counter to prove that One Tail was a pushover even without Black Zero. All you have to do was use every boost item in the game a couple of times, then set up Vengeful Counters to deal damage to him on the turns he heals to get a head start in whittling down his life energy. Also, you may have noticed, yeah, he still uses regeneration on turns he shouldn't. I have no allies for him to revive, but he'll still use it occasionally. No, I still haven't found a fix for this. It takes a bit of time to pull off this fight this way, however, the trick is to ensure that you get hit by One Tail with the Vengeful Counter active right before getting 2 turns in a row. Just using Heat Haze and a basic attack 2 turns in a row is just barely not enough to outpace his initial healing, but with the extra damage from countering, you can start getting the ball rolling so long as you don't skip a turn of attacking. If you can, try to heal on a turn that can be manipulated into allowing yourself to go next like you see right here. Overall, not a terrible fight, but not a cakewalk either. For the record, I did use 2 gain weapon energy plus 10s and a neutralizer 30 for my 4th medals, in case you were wondering. Two Tails is just fighting 2 Incentises at the same time, but in Two Tail form. They possess the same basic attacks, Hail Strike, Puncture Arrow, and Annihilator Hadouken, along with Ultra Giga versions of each element based on their elemental properties that turn. While they're certainly stronger than Incentis himself, they aren't terrible. Going Black Zero allows us to bite off chunks of damage while we... Alright, we kinda need the survivability here, don't we? Forsaking Black Zero, we just select to use boost items to increase our speed, power, and defenses so that we don't immediately die or misjudge an attack or a bad crit. Normally, you could just use Reverse Thunder, Reverse Water, and Reverse Fire, or even resist versions of them, but I didn't bother because I felt like I had something to prove. This does take a few tries to pull off, but I eventually managed to make the strat work when one of them goes down. Once one of the Two Tails dies, it's essentially a free ride since the other one can't one-shot me no matter what. Three Tails is where it gets a bit tricky. They can inflict all status effects in the game minus Codebreaker. This is solvable by equipping the block all force metal, but this creates the problem of them using status attacks far less from what I've noticed. This is bad because their normal attacks pack a huge punch before I can even get set up. Unfortunately, Black Zero isn't going to help us for this fight as we need to focus on increasing our defenses. And if that weren't enough, when any of them drop to around 50% life energy, they'll start trying to spam life gain 25 on each other. There is one saving grace of this fight, however. While it isn't stated anywhere on the wiki, there is a small gimmick to this fight. Every 3 turns, all 3 of them will use cryogenics, which we're immune to, but it at least allows me to calculate what the safe turns are. Once our defenses are maxed out, it's all about not getting hit by hell gravity and dealing enough damage to bypass their healing mechanics, which is easier said than done. The best way to do this is to reduce the life energy of one of the 3 tails as low as possible. Make sure you're at max life energy, then apply Unlock Limiter to stack with your other bonuses, then burst down the low health 3 tails with your 3 turns in a row while damaging the next one as fast as possible. While they'll still try to heal each other, it's much easier to outdamage the healing of 2 3 tails instead of 3, and since they don't use life gain 25 all the time, it's just really a matter of waiting until they decide not to. Eventually though, they falter their healing loop and allow me to kill the ones that are at low health, making the final one completely useless until I eventually win by War of Attrition. They award me with 3 build hypers, which I immediately use, putting my total hyper mode activations at 12. 4 Tails. Let's just say 4 Tails makes me wish I was Zero at the end of Megaman X1. Or Megaman X5. Or Megaman. The short version is that 4 Tails functions the same way as Scarface. If you hit him with a combat type attack, he will then block all combat type attacks with a chance to counterattack with puncture arrows, which in itself has a chance to drain all of my weapon energy when it lands, until you hit him with a shot type attack, where he will then start blocking all shot type base attacks and counterattacks them until he's hit with a combat attack, and so on and so forth. This wasn't so bad when fighting Scarface, since we had the power to burst him down quickly, negate his attacks, and survive overall. Unfortunately for us, even with our level and life energy as high as it was, we can't sustain ourselves against 4 Tails for very long. And to make matters worse, we can't really burst him down either because he has a gargantuan 121,500 life energy, some of the highest in the entire game. Without Super Force Metal Beta equipped, we're taking around 4,500 to 5,000 damage with just 4 Tails basic attack, and over 3,600 if he uses Annihilator Hadouken. The best way to fight this battle is to use Absolute Zero's action trigger to deal as much damage starting out, then stay in Absolute Zero form for the extra health boost and the increased chance to evade 4 Tails' attacks due to being able to fly. This does mean that I would have to start using my gain hypers religiously just so I don't cool down earlier than intended. While this strategy was pretty sound, there is a problem I encountered. See, there is a hidden feature of Absolute Zero that I've neglected to mention until now because it wasn't really relevant for any other part of the run. If Zero's life energy reaches to below 25%, he gets inflicted with the Berserk status that can't be cured until he heals to above 25%. This is bad for us because Berserk means you lose control of Zero, meaning you can't take the time to heal him. He would just target enemies or himself with basic attacks for the remainder of the run. And while you can definitely keep this from happening by just using sub-tanks, it's easy to miscalculate how much damage you can theoretically sustain, especially since attacks like Deep Impact deal over 4k damage due to ignoring the armor stat. What this means is, with 8,470 life energy in Absolute Zero form, you really don't want to take more than 2,117 damage, give or take, or else you'll be roughly in Berserk range when getting hit by Deep Impact. This will not do, as healing when barely taking any damage like that is a waste of resources and hyper mode activations, so you really do have to gamble on those misses when he does decide to go for deep impact. I won't lie, this is definitely the wall of this run for Zero, and is the first major roadblock for us to get through. While I didn't keep track of every attempt, I could probably tell you that I had at least 10 attempts, and I wouldn't be entirely inaccurate. The amount of damage Fourtails does by default is just too much, which makes sense given his meaty power stat of 380, the second highest power stat of any enemy in the game. So how did I ultimately handle this fight? Well, considering I was spending most of the fight in Absolute Zero form, I decided to use my highest power saber, the Ice Saber Plus, to give me the absolute most damage I can do while in hyper mode. I also tested Block All to see if it somehow made me immune to going berserk while at low life energy, but that didn't actually work, so the more you know. When that didn't work out, I went back to using 2 gain weapon energy plus 10s and a minus metal 20. The strat basically remained the same throughout otherwise, which was just try to brute force the fight. Naturally, my next step was to use the Super Force Metal Fragment Beta that I had. Oh, it's not in my inventory. Okay, so you might have been wondering why I hadn't brought up the Super Force Metal Beta up until now. And that's because after beating the game and reloading back to Chapter 10, I realized that I somehow forgot to steal the Super Force Metal Fragment Beta during my second attempt fighting Great Redex. So instead of redoing the entirety of Chapter 10 and gaining more unnecessary levels, I was hoping to not have to rely on it this time. Unfortunately, that's not gonna happen if I wanted to spend the next year brute forcing Fourtails and rolling perfect RNG. So for those unaware, Super Force Metal Fragment Beta gives the wearer a plus 100 to power, armor, and shield stats, and another plus 20 to speed stat, at the cost of 99 erosion. I also think that it reduces the amount of elemental damage you take, since I've noticed elemental attacks naturally deal less damage, but if it does, it's not listed. The way you're meant to bypass the cost of this item is by slapping on a few neutralizer minus 30s. But because Zero's immunity stat is so low at all states of the game, even with neutralizers he's still gonna be stuck in alert status. That's honestly fine, since being in alert status only gives you a chance to have our life energy or weapon energy stats nerfed. So we can just re-roll the fight by retrying until we start the combat with normal stats. Luckily, we didn't need to, so we just proceeded to do what we were doing before and brute force the entire combat, while also having better damage and survivability. It took a bit, but we managed to defeat Fourtails first try using our Super Force Metal Fragment Beta. Deep Impact was still a menace, but because his other attacks dealt much less damage to us, it wasn't as scary for me since I didn't have to worry about falling within Berserk range. Anyways, with Fourtails out of the way, let's move on. I didn't bother stealing his build hyper, but Fourtails does drop a Red Lotus Saber, the most powerful weapon in the entire game for Zero. Maybe even the entire game full stop. It hits 3 times like the Z-Rapier, but increases Zero's power by 80 rather than 40 from the Z-Rapier Plus. This is a sizable upgrade, but what makes it even better is its special effect. You see, it comes with 0 armor, shield, and weight, meaning it makes Zero fast, but sacrifices his armor and shield stat a little bit, right? Well, it's even worse than that. See, not only does the Red Lotus Saber provide no protection at all, it converts all of your shield and armor stats into raw, unadulterated power. If you ever wanted to know the definition of glass cannon, this build would be it. and you'll see the immediate difference right now. With the Red Lotus Saber and Super Force Metal Fragment Beta in hand, you can see just how much more damage we were doing as opposed to how much we were doing to Three Tails, for instance. Over 7,000 damage per hit before you even take Power Boost or Black Zero into account is astronomical. Unfortunately, the obvious downside to possessing this great power is... yeah. 2,500 damage from a single hit. Then I die to self-destruct, which is actually kinda normal, actually. To put this into perspective, 5 Tails has 180 power, 200 power less than 4 Tails, and they're doing around as much damage. I did try many different setups to try and mitigate the damage, such as using Super Absorbers or Speed plus 5 Force Metals to try and outspeed these lemmings, but none of that really worked out. Unfortunately, this means we aren't going to get much use out of the Red Lotus Saber. At least for now. What I eventually went with is the old strat I used for X Solo, where I equipped Zero with a couple of decoys and tried to get as many of the 5 Tails to low life energy as possible, hoping 1 or 2 would explode all over me while I finished off the last one before I could call for backup. Luckily, this worked after so many other attempts had failed, so that's these guys down. 6 Tails we don't mess around with. He has 206,500 life energy, the most of any boss in the entire game, barring Great Red Up's Phase 1. And he hits like a truck with a whopping 305 power. Not as much as 4 Tails, but still just as deadly. The real threat of this fight is the timer that shows up at the start. After 6 Tails takes 10 of his turns, he regains all of his health and gains a significant power boost that you most certainly won't be able to survive, especially solo. And if you do happen to survive for another 10 turns, he self-destructs, ending the fight instantly. While technically a win condition, you do lose out on the tank parts and figure token that he drops this way, so fighting him is favorable. We use Z Rapier Plus along with our Super Force Metal Fragment Beta and Black Zero for the extra speed boost to dish out as much damage as we can, while taking the most number of turns between his own turns, while trying our best to hold off on healing whenever possible. It's tight, but we managed to defeat 6 Tails just before his 10th turn. Not only do we obtain our tank parts and figure tokens, we also get a special message. That's right, our action trigger is finally leveled up. 7 Tails functions exactly the same way as the Belladonna's fight in the Reflection battle. The strat here is to ensure that you get as many turns as you can while focusing down one of the 7 Tails at a time. This is possible with Black Zero Speed Boost and Super Force Metal Fragment Beta. The only thing to watch out for is Deep Impact, since that scales to terrifying levels of damage if the 7 Tails are allowed to gain enough stats. Other than that, yeah, it's just Belladonna strats the entire time. 8 Tails is another nothing burger. Their gimmick is to focus down the lowest life energy party member, but since we're doing a solo run, we're always the lowest life energy party member, so just go Black Zero, whittle their life energy down as low as possible, then finish them off before they can call for backup, which I did using my new move, Zero Skull Crush. While this move is much harder to pull off than any of the other moves, it attacks at 100% power as opposed to Zero/'s 80% power, and will always crit. So the damage catches up very quickly, even if you only manage to get an 8-hit combo, as I end up dealing over 41,000 damage. Oh yeah, this is my new favorite attack.
My strength is unparalleled.
Here is the big cheese himself, 9 Tails. He sports 400 power, the highest in the game, and regenerates 25% of his current life energy every turn. And he has 92,500 life energy to boot, so our initial attacks need to be very meaty and beefy enough to bypass his life regen. Luckily, he still suffers from the same syndrome that 1 Tails suffers from, where he will try to revive party members that do not exist on our team, giving us a few free turns that we don't have to spend healing ourselves for. Sadly, our souped up basic attacks, as strong as they were, just weren't dealing enough damage to outdamage 9 Tails' healing. You may be saying to yourself, why don't you just use Red Lotus Saber for even more power? And to that I say, that's an arse argument. Unfortunately, But in all seriousness, Zero Skull Crusher couldn't have unlocked at a better time, as it deals so much damage that it completely outpaces any form of healing that Ninetales has. Unfortunately, I do bite the dust a few times due to miscalculating my life energy and turn order, and I throw many more attempts fishing for a combat where alert status doesn't completely cripple me. Eventually though, we spin to win enough times and put down the old fox as he drops the ancient gun, a figure token, and enough XP to push us to level 61 as we complete Megaman X Command Mission using only Zero.
Hardly a fight.
While we do the victory lap with our newly acquired Red Lotus Saber, I want to do a quick shout out to all of our Patreon and YouTube members who helped make this video possible. Special thanks to Patreon backers including Sokekan, Graciemi, Kilala, Dylan Toomey, Hound, Mean Kwantai, Cerulean Mimic, Shiny Blade, Ranimp, and to the YouTube members, Don Shimmer, Axel Ryman, Ryoko Strifer, 0132132, Kitasan Crimson, Minrod Vils, The Night Gamer, Shadow Arrow Ace, Kickbutt456, Rose King, Fabrizio Pignataro Nakuna Katax, Oplin, Jaffinator2166, Pika the Wumpus, Hunter Regal, Shattercoin, Ray the Shame, Platinum Espresso, Agrith Dragonflame, Part-Time Prick, Nep Dimension Bun, RNS, Hideo Wolfsbane, Azerox Burner, Tib J, Spartan of Life, Marcelo Sotelo, Amron Weber, Sketch Pixels, Starman 2001, Ying, Pierre, Rachel Wallace, Gunstriker EX, Stuffy 2002, Ignis, Craig Bolton, Zach Jackson, Moon Knight Productions, Minuscule Needs, Kitty, Kanda Yamamoto, June, Joshua Clark, Corporal Desh, Brandon Alligood, Nova, Framerate, Chris Addy, Tink, Creeps LP 97, 15Ker, Jolsef Jolstar, Chill Guy Pete, Blackbird Guardian, Samuel Your Best Nostalgia Shock, Colton W. While this run did take some time to get off the ground, once it did, Zero's immense power really started to shine in the later half of the game. Hell, Zero just gets so powerful by the end of the game that he can just tank Mad Nautilus without any effort. I don't know how this is even possible. As for Incentus,
How could this be?
anyways, before we close out of the video, I'd like to do something fun, which is rank how hard this run was in a tier list. If I had to rank X solo, I would probably put him in B tier. While there were some hard fights, there's no denying that I could have made some fights easier if I had played it a little bit more aggressively. But even when the genuinely tough fights came in, like with Epsilon, it challenged every bit of knowledge I knew about the game. It felt just right pretty much. As for Zero, I would put this run in about S tier. While it did take some time to pop off, once you reach chapter 4, Zero ends up taking off and just doesn't stop growing until he's at your front door, beating you to a pulp. There is another reason I put this run in S tier, and that's because, well, to be completely honest with you all, this is actually my second run through with Zero solo. You see, I had a completed run before this, but I really didn't like the aspect ratio of it and didn't think I would be able to fix it. It just looked gross to me, so I just decided, screw it, we're doing it again. I did do a few fights this run differently than the previous one, like not having or making use of Vengeful Counter for instance, but other than that, not much really changed. With this run completed, however, I wanted to present a question for you all. Now that Zero Solo is finished, and we now know that we can do solo runs of other characters, who would you like to see solo the game next? We have Axel, Marno, Cinnamon, and Massimo to choose from. And while Spider is also a choice, I actually want to do his run last for reasons I'm not ready to say just yet. So between the first four mentioned, who should take on the Rebellion army next? Please leave a comment, like, and subscribe to keep tabs on this journey, and I will see you all in the next one. Bye bye.